this is Matthew Struck with WhyLibertarian. I want to thank our guest today, our interviewee, Rianna. Rianna, what state are you joining us from?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, fantastic. So anyone who's not familiar with this channel or these types of interviews, the real intent is to give everyone a perspective on the diversity of how folks come to the Libertarian Party and just the really diverse background and kind of viewpoints that people hold that end up bringing them to this point. So Rianna, just tell us like a little bit of your background in terms of maybe like your voting record and how you kind of came to be a supporter of the Libertarian Party this election cycle.
Yeah, so I basically voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and I saw I was not into politics at the time, and it was just something I was kind of like, oh, my friends are all voting for Donald Trump, I'm going to do that. But the more I researched in the last 4 years and everything that's gone on just within this year, 2020, I had to find another candidate because I was not about to vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. So I had to do my research, and I found the Libertarian Party, and I seem to align best with the policies of the Libertarian Party. So
awesome. So let me ask you, let's kind of like go chronologically. So in terms of your, voting for Trump in 2016, what did you kind of like expect that you were getting out of that? And what do you feel like you did or didn't get from that vote back in 2016?
Well, I think Donald Trump made a lot of promises and did not keep them.
Okay.
And, a lot of things, he has done a lot of things, but I don't think that he's necessarily fit for office. I mean, with everything that's happened in the world, it's just the way he's handling things. It's just not okay for me. I can't in good conscience support that,
Fair enough.
So.
Yep. And so specifically policy-wise, I think when we were kind of just doing our pre-chat here, one of the things that came up with was healthcare that was really near and dear to you, that kind of brought you in this direction. Could you just speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I myself have an autoimmune disease, and I had to wait 4 months to get in to see a specialist. So within that 4 months, I have rheumatoid arthritis, and I had no idea what it was until I could get all the x-rays and blood work back, which that also took like 2 weeks to get the results back from. Basically, that struck a nerve with me because I had 4 months of irreversible damage to my joints, and I feel that there is some serious issues within our healthcare system.
Most definitely. And so anyone who's unfamiliar who might watch this, Dr. Jorgensen, her position is in line pretty much with what the libertarian idea would be, is open and competitive markets, right? A free marketplace. And so it sounds like what you're saying is what you feel like a more competitive marketplace would have meant there were other providers out there that were going to be a little bit quicker to take care of things for you. Is that kind of accurate in what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, by allowing real price competition, we could reduce the overall cost of healthcare itself. So, I mean,
yeah, I can tell you, someone who works in the insurance industry, you're right. What's tough is explaining to people the inefficiencies that are there. I mean, if they could truly understand the inefficiencies that were there, they would be even more appalled than when they have to pay their policy premiums. But yeah, no, that's a good point. I think you also raise another good point is if you have to wait 4 months, right? It's not just the issue that you're dealing with at the time. It's the follow-on damage that's done as a result of it, right? And anyone who's unfamiliar with that condition, it's mostly like an inflammation issue, right? That you have.
Yeah. So I would have like flare-ups every week, and within that 4-month period, I couldn't work anymore. I used to coach gymnastics, and that was just something I couldn't handle anymore. I would have, swollen ankle out of nowhere, and it would be like, I can't stand on my feet for much longer. So I actually ended up leaving my job at the time, and they put me on medications because you have to jump through all the hoops for the insurance companies to get to the medication that actually works. So, putting somebody on a medication that is going to do more harm than good is just, it's cruel.
Yeah.
And, luckily I don't have, something more serious where, if somebody with cancer has to wait 4 months to be seen by a specialist, that's inhumane.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think, and I appreciate you sharing that story, because I think a lot of the narrative on the part of folks that would have healthcare kind of administered, or um, you know, the architect of healthcare in this country be kind of more of a centralized authority, they would make the argument that, healthcare would be more accessible and more plentiful. But it sounds like that you had pretty much the opposite
Hmm.
experience within that system. So I appreciate you being open and sharing that story. Let's transition to something that's a little bit more kind of like on the economic side and budgetary side. I think you had mentioned that taxes and the overall way that we kind of like conduct ourselves financially as a country is also something that's of concern to you, right?
Absolutely. I think that government spending is outrageous. And by reducing that government debt and the government spending, that we would save money overall as a nation. And we need to stop borrowing.
Mm.
And if Joe gets in office, I truly believe that she would bring this nation back to where it needs to be financially. Because I'm scared.
Yeah,
I'm scared of what the two-party system will do.
yeah. I think what's interesting is also we'd kind of in conjunction with this pre-talk has been we talked about kind of like COVID response too, right?
Mhm.
And I think what got missed by a lot of people is we're talking about stimulus and the government shutting things down and then having to be basically the employer of last resort in these cases and stuff. Um, the savings rate, had it been better in the country before this hit, we would have been better off, right? And that really goes hand in hand with kind of that like borrow and spend mentality that the feds use. And then that's also kind of like what our economy is based off of, right? It's, why put money away today when you could spend it today and not have to put off your material satisfactions, I guess I would put it that way. Um, now you're younger. Are you worried about that financial future for, yourself and then maybe potentially your family down the line?
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to have to be paid off at some point,
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah,
right now it's only getting worse. And until somebody does something about it, I mean, honestly, I could see another nation possibly taking over America if we are, not careful about how we're spending.
right.
So, I mean, it's honestly scary.
Yeah.
And,
I, I had this conversation with, do you know Joe Evans, who's running for Congress in Idaho? Have you seen him online at all?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, so I had a conversation with him live last night that streamed, and one of the things that he brought up was, or kind of we came up with together was, we were wondering how close to the cliff we are, right? Like if you see the cliff coming, at some point in time you can see it and you start to pull up on the reins, right? Um, it's like we're hitting the accelerator, right? Like we're going even faster.
Yeah.
Um, so I just wonder how that ends up playing out, Now, in terms of like the area in PA that you grew up in, sounds like it was a little bit more of a conservative area, right?
Well, I'm like right outside of Pittsburgh.
Okay,
So I actually live in Butler County, which is, you go from Allegheny County, which is where Pittsburgh is, to Butler, and
right.
it goes from Biden signs to just Trump signs everywhere.
Yeah,
So, um, but yeah, you know what? Like the one thing that it just blows my mind is that we as a nation were buying COVID tests from other countries because the FDA did not approve COVID tests that were American made.
right. Yeah,
That could have been money spent to help our economy rather than and save lives. Save lives. I mean, that's the bottom line is too many people have died and we need to do something about it, you know?
I think that's a good point. I think we also had an issue as far as the information that came from the top, right? Like I was speaking to someone earlier today where we just had a conversation about, general questions having to do with COVID and prevention, and how if you asked 100 people in 100 Americans, you would get such a wide range of answers on what the truth actually is, right? And it's not that there necessarily needed to be centralized propaganda that came from the federal level or the state level, but there needed to be some kind of coordination that didn't happen. And I would really chalk that up. I would love to hear your opinion on this. I would really chalk that up to the division between the two sides, right? Like, so both the Republicans and the Democrats are so polar and so at each other's throat all the time. It almost seems like that dynamic had more to play in this situation than anything, in terms of them just not aligning with what they thought the right direction was be. Do you kind of have like that sense of how that played out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that both sides have trouble seeing eye to eye with one another. And
That's an understatement.
yeah, I mean, and I really wish we could have, if we could go back in time and, kept this virus under control by just doing what we all want to do for America. I mean, I don't think everybody's like that, but I think that the majority of people want to, look out for their neighbor,
Right.
and I think that the government mandating this lockdown in the beginning of COVID, the Republicans are like, oh my gosh, our rights, you're trying to take our rights away, and the left was like, no, you guys are crazy, and they just could not come together and see this as a public health issue. It
Right.
turns so political.
Yeah.
And that's does not make sense to me.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
and I can tell you, is someone who's kind of been in the libertarian ecosystem for a little bit longer, that's really like the litmus test for figuring out whether or not government should really be the option that provides the solution, right? If it's something where the you're relying on government to do it, the process of government is so like bass backward in the way that it works that it literally needs to be the last option, right?
absolutely.
You may experience this, like if you have friends that are kind of more on that Biden side of the county line, right? I Do you experience that kind of like their first thought when they're thinking of like an issue and what needs to be the solution? Do they kind of default to like, well, we need to ask the state, or we need to ask the feds for help? Have you had that experience on your side?
Absolutely. I see that the Democrats just want to throw more money at a problem
Hmm.
that needs solved in like on the community level.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not even just with one certain policy, it's with everything. They're wanting to throw money to try and fix the issue.
Right.
And it's not working. We
Yeah.
need another approach.
Yeah. And
I,
and I think you had made the comment before, the Republicans used to fight back against what they thought was frivolous spending, right? Do you still have that sense of them now?
no, absolutely not. And Donald Trump is the furthest thing from conservative. That's and people are like, oh no, we need to cut government spending, vote for Trump. It's like,
Yep.
if you go back and watch his interviews from 2000 and the 90s, he is not conservative at
Right.
all.
Right.
And it just blows my mind that people don't look into it. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of folks, whether it's that they feel like they're too busy, or whether they feel like they just maybe they wouldn't understand it, or they just don't know who to like listen to, so they just figure they'll take what sounds good and run with it. I think they allow that to kind of really dictate their personal narrative, or kind of the tack that they take. I mean, I'm probably really overgeneralizing, but it definitely seems that way. Where what's funny is you hit on it. Like, it's the difference between, so like a New York Republican, I would say, is the same thing, or just like the counterpoint to an Alaskan Democrat, right? Like if you take a Democrat from Alaska and you like start asking them and probing them political questions, you're like, you're a Republican, right? Like, there's a very small difference between those two sides in Alaska, but the same can be said in, a Republican coming from New York, unless they're coming from like rural New York, which Donald Trump most certainly does not come from rural anywhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, uh, but so I love that point because there used to be a system of checks and balances where it was like, one side felt that they could, outspend the problem or spend to fix the problem. And the other side was like, no, rein it in, come with some more realistic positions. I think that's a fantastic, I think that's a fantastic perspective. I'm refreshed by the fact that you're a younger voter that's coming. Why wouldn't you go in the position of, did you ever think about kind of like going in the Bernie Sanders, direction, or was that not necessarily on the table?
Um, well, so originally I was registered as a Republican, then I switched to Democrat,
Hmm.
and then I switched to independent. But I never really agreed with Bernie Sanders on the, Medicare for all and all that stuff, because that's just, even Dr. Joe says, that's VA hospitals for all, and that's not good healthcare. It's just
Right.
not,
Right.
it's not good. It's not a good system. And, I think that the Democrats, I think that they have good intentions, but they're just not going about it right.
Okay.
And the fact that they picked Joe Biden blows my mind. Like, I don't, like, out of all of those candidates, they picked Joe Biden. That just,
Yeah. Well, you had made the
you know,
comment earlier that um, you and a lot of people watched what happened to Tulsi, right?
yeah,
In that entire process. Um, I don't know if you were paying enough attention back in 2016, but the similar dynamic played out with Bernie back in 2016 when they nominated Hillary. Um, is that something that would, kind of turned you off, where maybe you would have been a little bit amenable to, uh, kind of like a more Tulsi Gabbard type candidate, and just seeing her get swallowed up by the establishment on that side? Do you think that kind of disenfranchised you from the Democratic side?
absolutely. I mean, and I also personally, I liked Elizabeth Warren as well.
Hmm.
I think that some of her policies were very good and
Yep.
that she could have been a very good candidate, and I think that's part of the problem. You have these primary elections and people vote for, the Iowa caucus,
Hmm.
and everybody sees, oh, okay, Joe Biden's in the lead.
Right.
And so then the rest of the nation's like, okay, well, I guess I have no other option since,
Yeah.
he's already in the lead. Like, the system is so messed up,
Yeah.
and I do think that if they would have picked a better candidate for the Democrats, I might have considered it.
Mm.
But honestly, in 2016, I had no idea there was even a third option. I had no idea. Like, I was not in tune with politics at all.
Hmm.
I was just kind of like doing my own thing, trying to stay out of that whole mess of things, because
Yeah.
I always saw people in my family fighting over politics, and I'm like, oh, I just don't want anything to do with that.
Yep.
So, and of course, like, my family is primarily Democrat, so they all were on my case when I voted for Trump.
Oh, I'm sure.
So,
Wait, is this election cycle kind of the first time that you were introduced to like the libertarian, philosophy, or even know the party existed before that?
no,
Okay.
not at all. I was, ignorance is bliss when it comes to politics. And, I honestly, it was Gary Johnson that ran in 2016. And I look back and I'm like, why didn't I vote for him? Like, I didn't even know he existed.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
watched the debate a little bit,
Yep.
but I was just, he wasn't included. So it was not something that I
Yeah.
saw.
That's an interesting line of conversation there. What do you make of how they determine who gets on the debate stage? Has that been something that you've kind of looked into in your research?
Absolutely. I've
Yeah.
emailed every single mainstream media company about including Joe into the polls, and
Awesome.
didn't hear back from a single one. I emailed CNN, NPR, Fox, MSNBC, haven't
Yep.
heard a word.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a system that they're intentionally trying to silence her from America. America, they don't want to show that option.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, so
So
the easiest conspiracy is the conspiracy where you only have two actors in there, right? Like as soon as you add that third one in, it becomes way too hard to kind of keep keep everything, like evenly distributed, so to speak. So the way they think of it is, and again, libertarians would never be a part of, some cartel type political setup, but the way they think, I think, is the issue that they run into is something where they don't want to let that third option in because there's only enough
you
for.
cut out there for a
Oh,
minute.
I cut out a little bit. I don't know where I
Yeah.
cut out, but I was going off on my diatribe about how the easiest way to split the baby is if you have two parties involved, right? As soon as you get the third one involved, it's now mayhem because you can't decide, all right, you take that part and I take this part. Um, uh, it becomes something where your conspiracy of two is now upended because you have an outside voice that's now kind of making sense of things, hopefully. But yeah,
I
no,
mean, that's Joe Biden. And now I'm not sure if this is 100% true, but I read on, I wish I could give you the source, but Joe Biden tried to steal Jo Jorgensen's URL for her website or something back in May.
that's interesting.
And she had to find a new website. I think it was a website or her Twitter name or something.
Hmm.
And his campaign tried to completely eliminate people from knowing who Joe was.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know, and the whole.
Well, you see it in, I don't know if you follow what happened down in Texas. In Texas, they actually tried to get both the Libertarians and the Greens removed from the ballot. And I
They
forget.
removed Hawkins from Pennsylvania's ballot.
Yeah, yeah, and I forget what the argument was, but they try and use some of these like arbitrary these arbitrary kind of arguments to remove competitors off of the ballot. And in one respect, I would say, look, game on. Like if the system is built that way, then libertarians just have to get really good at heading them off at the pass, right? From another standpoint, we definitely need to sound the trumpet and be like, look at what these people are trying to do. They're trying to um, suppress what you perceive as your options to vote for, right? Um, have you ever looked up? I don't know if if you ever watch TED Talks or anything like that, but there's a TED Talk, and anyone who watches this definitely look this up. There's a TED Talk on tweedism, TWEEDISM, and that dynamic that you were talking about, like with the primaries and how such like a small group of people kind of dictate how the primaries go, that actually extends through to the general. Because I don't know if you remember, but in 2016 they were basically saying that Trump won by basically 77,000 votes, right? In a country of over 300 million people. I forget what the total eligible voter number is. It's somewhere in like the 160 range, something like that, 170. But the dynamic is that such a small minority of voters dictate who the options are when it comes to the general, and then they end up dictating who eventually wins, right? So a third party, anyone who has felt disenfranchised from that kind of mechanism, a third party is also a really great way to upend that just ridiculously small minority that gets a say over who gets elected to these positions for the majority of the country. So yeah, definitely look that up. Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. I would say, is there anything else that's kind of been on your mind policy wise, or are those the big ones for you?
Those are the big ones. I would say also that it's very important for people to know that a third party vote is not a waste. And I can't explain to you how many people have said, oh, you're wasting your vote. I'm like, I think I'm doing the complete opposite of that
Yeah.
because I'm voting for policies, not for party. And I think that's so important for people to understand is that don't ever vote based on party. Vote for policies that are best for you. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the most, people are so brainwashed into saying that. Like every single person I've talked to who is not a libertarian, they're like, oh, that's a waste of a vote. It's like, instead of attacking the 3 to 4% that are voting libertarian, let's focus on like the 29% of voters who are eligible voters who didn't vote.
Yep.
So
No, that is an awesome talking point, because if you're squabbling over like the couple million votes that are going to the Libertarian Party, hopefully it's more than that. It's been going up every single election cycle over the last at least 3. But if you're squabbling over those votes, you're resigning yourself to understand that you can't motivate the other 29. I've seen even numbers upwards of over 30% of the valid eligible voters aren't choosing to vote. And I actually had someone last night who made the comment online that sometimes it's people that would normally vote for say like the red candidate or the blue candidate, and they're just in a place that is just heavily leveraged to one side. To those people, I would make the argument, vote for the third party candidate that appeals to you, right? Not based off of party or anything like that, but because that now kind of breaks up that dynamic. So if you feel disenfranchised, where you're like, well, normally I would vote this way, but this whole district is on the other side of the aisle from what I would vote, you're actually better off voting third party, because if you brought a third party in, it might actually imbalance that dynamic, where now all of a sudden you actually have a shot. So now it's a 3-way race as opposed to a 1-way race. And you have a better shot if it's a 3-way race than if your best shot is 0 out of 1. So anyway, I want to thank you. I appreciate it. You're definitely representative of again a unique kind of perspective that brought you here, and I'm really glad that you found and not necessarily, doesn't necessarily have to be a lifetime home in the party, but I love that you found policies that really kind of appeal to what you're looking for the country to be for you. So I applaud that. So thank you.
thank you.
All right. So I appreciate your time, and maybe we'll be able to pick this up again sometime later to do a follow-up, maybe post-election.
All right, yeah, that would be awesome.
All right. Thanks, Rianna.